Today, I'm behind the wheel of a brand new 2021 Jeep Grand Cherokee L. Now, L stands for long, which means this Grand Cherokee does have 3 rows and can haul up to 7 passengers. Now, Jeep recognizes that families in the US want bigger SUVs, ones with more cargo room and ones that can haul more passengers. That is why this is one of 2 SUVs Jeep introduced recently that has 3 rows. The bigger Grand Wagoneer, that's in the full-size SUV segment. This Grand Cherokee L is within the mid-size SUV segment, which means it competes with the likes of the Kia Telluride, the Honda Pilot, Ford Explorer, and Hyundai Palisade. So, how good is this brand new Grand Cherokee L? Well, let's find out. Now, before I go for a drive, let me show you the outside and show you all the features you'll find inside this brand new Grand Cherokee L. Starting with the outside, this 2021 Grand Cherokee L actually does not resemble the smaller Grand Cherokee, and that's because this is brand new, new design, new platform, new interior, new everything. But the 2022 Grand Cherokee will resemble this L. Regardless, this brand new Grand Cherokee L looks like a Jeep. You could just tell the design cues very Jeep-like, and it's an enormous SUV. This is very high off the ground. In fact, ground clearance is near 11 inches, which is class leading for this segment. Also, in terms of length, width, height, it's among the biggest in this class. And if you thought Jeep just borrowed the Dodge Durango's chassis, think again. This is actually 4 inches longer than the Durango and 2 inches wider, and also the wheelbase is about 1.4 inches longer. So this is brand new for Jeep, and this is a unibody construction, not a body-on-frame construction. So that is also new for this brand new Grand Cherokee L. Looking at the front end, very aggressive, very high hood, and you can't mistake the 7-slot grille. That is, of course, a Jeep classic. On both sides, you have very distinctive looking LED headlights, and they're surrounded by this aluminum looking strip that's matched below also on the lower bumper, and that theme spreads across the entire Grand Cherokee L, which actually adds some pop, and I actually do like that design. Now, moving to the side, you could tell this Grand Cherokee L is long. It's very, very long, and that's to accommodate the 3rd row seat and the additional cargo room in the back. You could definitely see that the roof height is very tall. The hood is also very tall, and this one comes with optional 21-inch wheels, which really pop, and they actually don't look too big on a big SUV like this. Also, that aluminum trim I talked about, you can see on the roof rails and also on the door handles and on the bottom of the doors. And moving towards the back, you can see some nice looking LED tail lamps, 2 big chrome finishers towards the bottom, and of course, you do see a privacy glass, a spoiler, shark fin antenna on top, and some more of that aluminum trim throughout. Now, moving inside the tailgate, it is height adjustable, and of course it's powered, and even behind the 3rd row seats, there's a decent amount of cargo room, so that length definitely comes in handy. Underneath, you have a little bit of hidden storage. Also, on the right side, you do see that you have a 12V outlet and power switches to fold down your 3rd row, which is automatic, but it does take some time for the seats to fold down and up. And you could also fold down the 2nd row, although they don't come back up, you'll have to manually pull them back up. But if you fold down all the seats, you can see that you have a massive amount of cargo room. The only thing is the center console of the 2nd row is not flat. It's not flush with the seats when they're folded down, so it's not completely flat. Now, moving to the 2nd row, because this is a Summit Reserve, which is the top trim level for the Grand Cherokee L, everything inside is covered in beautiful leather. Not just leather, but beautiful quilted and perforated leather, and you see that across the entire cabin. Now, this Summit Reserve also has a center console in the middle that I talked about, and it's kind of cool. You put your cup holders there, also armrests, and you have some storage inside. But because of it, you can't slide in between the captain chairs, so you do have to fold the seats up if you want to access the 3rd row. Luckily, Jeep thought of that, and the mechanism to fold up the 2nd row is actually very nice. You see here, once folded up, there's a lot of room to get in the 3rd row, and that's because the seats not only slide forward, but also tilt upwards. And it also works if you have car seats on them, I just don't have any to test out with. Now in the third row, there's actually a good amount of legroom if you move the second row up just slightly. The seats are still pretty low to the bottom. However, there's USB ports on both sides and vents. So it's actually pretty well appointed in the third row. Now, of course, it's a lot more comfortable in the second row. There's plenty of room. I'm 5'10" and I have about 6 inches of leg room when the seats are all the way back. And of course, you can slide them forward and backwards, and also the seats can recline. Passengers in the back get climate control, also heated and ventilated seats, although the ventilated seats is part of an additional package. Also, you get a lot, 4 USB ports, a 12V outlet, another set of vents on both sides, and you do get sunshades. Now moving to the front, the dash, the center console design, the seats, everything is beautiful, very luxurious-like and very modern. Starting with the steering wheel, it's nice and big, it has a good thickness, and it feels good overall. This one also comes with paddle shifters in the back, and you have some buttons on the right side that controls your safety systems, cruise control, and the left side for your phone, music, and also to control your digital gauge cluster. Digital gauge cluster is very customizable too. You could see there's 5 menu items that you could choose from, and within each one, there's many things to look at. For example, you have one for trip computer, also one for your fuel economy, but also TPMS and other things about your Jeep Grand Cherokee L. And then you have one that shows you the pitch and roll, and also your 4-wheel drive setup. There's a lot of things that you can see and configure inside this digital gauge cluster. It's actually one of the best ones I've tested. This Summit Reserve also gives you 2 memory seats, power folding mirrors, which are also heated, and you do have a 10.1-inch touchscreen with the brand new Uconnect 5 system. This interface is cleaner and it's more simple than other Uconnects I've tested in the past, which is fantastic, but you could see there's a lot of lag. When I go into apps and I switch from apps to vehicle or inside comfort, I mean, there's a slight lag there, and it gets better with time. I don't know why that is, but expect there is going to be some lag. However, you pretty much get everything inside. Amazon Alexa, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, those are standard. Also, because of the Summit Reserve, you do get all the cameras, forward-facing, reverse, and a 360 camera view, which is fantastic. You can see all around your Grand Cherokee L. Now, in case you didn't want to use the touchscreen, there's pretty much buttons and knobs for everything else. On top, you do have some buttons for your engine auto start stop, some of your safety systems, and your parking system. But underneath, that's where the climate controls can be found. You still have a volume knob and a tune knob, and your temperature control and heated and ventilated seats, your auto setting, among many things. I don't know if you've been keeping track of USB ports. There are actually 12 inside this Grand Cherokee L. There's 4 up here, 4 in the second row, and also 4 in the third row. That's a lot of USB ports. Now below that, you do have a shifter knob that you can scroll through, pretty easy to figure out. Also, you have switches for your height control. The Summit Reserve does come with air suspension, which is really nice. It'll automatically adjust up and down depending on condition and depending on the drive mode that you select. And there are a lot of drive modes. You have auto, and of course you have snow, sand, mud, rock, and sport. Just depends on what your mood is and what you're trying to tackle. Also, you do have a 4-wheel drive low, which helps you get out of sticky situations. Lastly, on top, you have HomeLink buttons and a gigantic panoramic sunroof. All right, I'm behind the wheel. Let's see how good this brand new Grand Cherokee L is and see how it drives. The first thing I want to talk about is the step in height and the height overall, because the Grand Cherokee L is very high off the ground. For those of you guys on the shorter side, you may have some difficulty getting in. This almost feels as high off the ground as a full-size truck, and that's really, really strange. But that's what the height control is for. You can adjust things up and down. Unfortunately though, when the car is parked, it doesn't automatically go down to the lowest level. If you could set that, that would be fantastic. But normally when you shut your car off, it's right in the middle and it's very high off. But if you're going off-road, right, this SUV is fantastic. I would argue this is the best 3-row SUV you could take off-roading because of that ground clearance, and of course, because this is a Jeep, it's trail rated. Now this Grand Cherokee, I did mention, has 4-wheel drive low, also has electronic limited locking differential in the rear, and all the drive modes. There's one for every situation, so it definitely can tackle whatever you're thinking about. Now the visibility up here is pretty good too. The windshield is very raked, although I think there's still a good amount of viewable area up front. I can clearly see over my hood. Also the side windows are nice and big. The only exception is the rear window. With the third row seats up, they block like half your visibility. So the way it's designed, if you don't have anyone in the third row, you should definitely fold it down because it does block a lot of your rear visibility. But besides rear visibility, everything else is pretty darn good. Even the blind spot, the second row windows are enormous, so blind spot is not really a problem. And you get blind spot monitoring in here, so that's not a worry. Yes, you do have that commanding view, but in terms of width, it definitely doesn't feel as wide as a Telluride. In fact, up here, I would say the one negative is the center console area is too wide in my opinion. I actually feel like my knee bangs up against the center console. And for a big SUV like this, that shouldn't happen. So that's one negative. Now in the second row and third row, it's very spacious. For most adults, kids, you're not gonna have a problem inside this Grand Cherokee L. However, it does feel smaller than a Telluride, despite the fact that dimensions say otherwise. Now this Grand Cherokee L is really smooth. It's really smooth. Let's start out with the suspension. This one comes with optional 21-inch wheels, which is part of a package, but normally with the Summit Reserve, you get 20-inch wheels. And normally with wheels this big, the sidewall is much smaller and there's a lot more bumps and imperfections that you normally feel on the road, but this Grand Cherokee is really well dampened. And not only do you have air suspension, but the suspension that Jeep decided to put in here just is really nice. Finely tuned, soaking up all the bumps. I really enjoy it. It does not feel bumpy at all in here. And if you did have smaller wheels, I think it'd feel even more comfortable. I think Jeep did a fantastic job with the steering. Now, one of the things I love about the Telluride is the steering. I think it's the perfect weight and precision, and this Jeep also feels very similar. I think Jeep did a really good job with this, not only the steering wheel, which looks good and feels really good, but the overall feel is just right. It's in the middle. Doesn't feel very loose, not very hard or stiff. You do have two engine options with the Grand Cherokee L. The base one, which is a 3.6 liter V6, it produces about 290 horsepower, a little bit under 260 pound-feet of torque. It's made into an 8-speed automatic. Now, I think around town, this engine is more than enough. It feels really good. The 8-speed keeps the engine in check. You're getting the right gear all the time, enough power at all speeds. But if you're really gunning it, you're really flooring it, you'll feel slightly underpowered. But that's why there's an optional Hemi available, 5.7 liter Hemi V8, and that one's producing close to 360 horsepower. Interesting thing is, remember I showed you a digital gauge cluster, how there's 5 menu items you could choose from? In case you didn't want to choose one, you could just leave it in that view, and all 5 will update simultaneously. It is very quiet in here. The only thing I hear is a little bit from the road, from the tires, but that's about it. It's very quiet in here. As for the brakes, I think it's okay. The pedal is somewhat linear. It comes on strong, then it gets a little mushy and then comes on strong again. So it's not 100% linear. It takes getting used to, but once you get used to it, I think it'll be okay. And this Grand Cherokee L does come to a stop fairly quickly. All the safety features in terms of adaptive cruise control, lane keep assist, emergency braking, blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic alert, auto steering, basically anything you can think of. The one thing I haven't talked about yet is pricing, and that may be the Achilles heel to this Grand Cherokee L. Base price, the base Grand Cherokee L starts a tad over $40,000. So you're not gonna find one under $40,000. And every trim level starts adding up really quickly. So this one is the Summit Reserve. This is the top trim level with 4x4, and I do have one package installed on here with a lot of niceties. But this is coming in around $64,000. So it's above $60,000. Now, to compare, the top trim level with all the options on a Telluride and a Palisade tops in around $50,000. Even a Toyota Highlander fully loaded is a little bit over $50,000. It's like $52,000. So this is coming in a full $12,000 more than those others. Now, I know you do get a little bit more. I mentioned there are things in here that you can't get with any other SUV of this class, but at $64,000, this is in the luxury car segment now, right? So you have to decide if this is worth it.